Hello, all my friends out there. I hope you're good and your walk is light. Today I want to talk about, something that just happened. A friend of mine just called me after attending her church, and she was crying about something she was having a problem with. And that problem is that she has a gay son. And today's sermon, unbeknown to her, was about how gays are forbidden from entering God's love and heaven. And while I try not to bash Christianity, and I don't blame all Christianity, I don't blame all Christians, I still consider myself a follower of Jesus. I don't call myself a Christian, but it's just a label. They're all just labels. Anything you do in spirituality, it's the same thing, it's just a label. But what I'm getting at is, she called me crying about this. And I tried to explain to her that one of the things that was given to me when I left Christianity was, if a rule doesn't serve love, it's not from God. So if a rule doesn't serve love, if the rule isn't built on the foundations of what love stands for and what love represents, it cannot be from an all-knowing, unconditionally loving God. It just can't be. And if you're a Christian and you're listening to this and you don't agree with anything I'm about to say, you're more than welcome to comment, and I will happily comment back in a safe, sane, and adult way. Because I feel that if Jesus were standing here today, I think he'd look around at all the churches, all the arguments, all the judgment, and say something really simple. He'd say exactly what I just said. If a rule doesn't serve love, it's not from God. And I don't think that he'd mean it in a poetic way. I think he'd mean it literally. Because Jesus never came to build a religion, no matter what they've told you. He came to wake people up, to remind us that the point of life, the point of faith, is love. Not rules, not fear, not guilt. But see, over time, people started building walls where he himself tore them down. They took his words meant to set people free, and turned them into systems that keep people in line. They took his message of love and they replaced it with checklists, hierarchies, and threats, and guilt, and shame, and sin. And in reality, if you think, you can almost hear Jesus saying, wait, that's not what I meant. Because they once asked him, Teacher, which of the rules is the greatest? And he said, love God with all of your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. But they kept adding rules. Who could speak? Who could lead? Who could love whom? Who could belong? And who could not? And so I ask you again, if a rule doesn't serve love, how can it be from God? Because God's laws, source, whatever you call your deity or your meaning, those laws are not chains. They are wings. They lift you higher, closer to mercy, closer to one another. If a rule shames or silences or wounds, then it's man-made. It's a fence made by men around a heart that God meant to be free. If a commandment makes you fear your neighbor or despise yourself, it cannot be divine. Because love casts out fear. If your faith is teaching you who not to sit beside, who not to bless, who not to touch, then you've forgotten the table that Jesus set, where tax collectors and sinners and women and children and doubters and strangers all broke bread together. He healed people the religious leaders said were unclean. He spoke to women and foreigners the culture said were beneath him. He ate dinner with the ones that everyone else judged. And when the religious elites got mad, he told them the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, folks, rules exist to help people, not to hurt them. If a rule makes you less loving, less compassionate, or more judgmental, it cannot be God's rule. Because love is not weak. It doesn't mean anything goes. It means nothing cruel remains. So keep the rules that heal. Keep the rules that feed the hungry, lift up the fallen, forgive the offenders, and set the captives free. Those are God's laws. The rest, the rules that divide, that punish love, that glorify power, are written on paper by men, not on hearts. Tear them down and write it again in mercy's ink. If a rule doesn't serve love, it's not from God. My friend was in such pain thinking that her son is going to this eternal damnation pit of fire and brimstone and a guy with horns and all that other jazz because the church that she attends does not understand what God's love really is. And unfortunately, she's been duped. Look at what's happened since Jesus. We've got churches that say, you're not welcome if you're gay. Churches that silence women and won't let them preach. Churches that protect their image more than they protect the people that actually go to their church. Religions that use fear of hell to control instead of love of life to inspire. And when you ask me, it's just my opinion, but I think when Jesus would look around and say, you all missed the point, because he never said, they'll know you as my followers by your theology or the church you attend. He didn't say that. He said, they'll know you're my followers by your love. See, love doesn't mean we throw away wisdom or boundaries, but it does mean that every law, every teaching, every policy should be tested by one question. Does this bring more love into the world or less? Because if it brings more compassion, healing, and understanding, that's from God. That's from Source. If it brings more shame, fear, or division, that's from man. Jesus didn't die to start a club with membership rules. He died showing what unconditional love looks like, forgiving even those who killed him on that day. He didn't say, follow my rules. He said, follow me. And where did he go? He went to the broken, to the judged, to the sinners, to the ones the system threw away. So when you hear all those religious voices saying, you don't belong, you're a sinner, your son's going to hell, you're not good enough, remember this, my friends. That's not God talking. That's fear pretending to be holy. Because the real message, the one that Jesus lived, is simple. Love one another as I have loved you. And if a rule doesn't serve that love, it's not from God. I'm sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings, but it's true. And all you have to do is use your logical, free mind that God and Source gave you to understand this. When I have friends, people that I care about, loved ones, come to me crying and in pain because some man somewhere else doesn't agree with how her son lives his life, I will make statements such as this. It's time we stop worshiping the rule book and start living the relationship. Because maybe the greatest act of faith today is to love beyond the limits religion tries to set. Because that's what Jesus did, and that's what he meant. And that's a truth they've been missing for 2,000 years. Free your mind. I love you all. Walk in light.